So let's look at this. So at Forrester, we started looking at this concept called big process, right? How many of you are familiar with big data? Okay, everybody should be raising their hand, right? How many of you care about big data? Okay, still some hands went up. We'll talk about that in a second. But when we start looking at big process and defining big process, it really is about moving from these siloed BPM efforts that really have multiple different approaches into more transformational efforts that bring everything together. I mean, one of the things I love about what I do is rolling up my sleeves and going out and working with clients, right? So I still have my analyst hat on, but I put on my other hat of getting in the trenches and actually helping clients work through their process challenges, set their strategy, and then execute it, right? That's what I love. And one of the things I see, and I've been seeing this more lately, is clients bring us in to talk about and try to figure out how do we bring together these 5 or 6 BPM efforts throughout our company into something that actually makes sense. I mean, and you guys probably are dealing with the same thing. I went to one customer where they had 5 different distinct BPM programs, all using different tools, all using different methodologies, right? That's really what we're trying to attack with big process. Not saying you got to go and get one, but really being able to bring all of that into a holistic view. And so I gave you the big process thinking, right? Shifting your thinking to look at the entire spectrum of what you're dealing with process. But to get there, it's really about bringing a collection, a portfolio of tools and approaches that deal with process in a more holistic way, right? It's taking everything into account, but then stitching it together. So how do we get there? So, so when Appian invited me to talk, you know, they said, let's talk about big process. We like what you guys are doing around big process, but let's talk about how do people tackle this? How do they actually wrestle with this and actually deal with the real process in their organizations, right? And in the back of my mind, I was thinking, there is no way to tame big process. Like, let's just forget about that, right? This is just a fact. Again, I came here to have an adult conversation with you, to tell you the truth. And the reality is, it really is about just hanging on, right? Things change. You guys know this. I'm preaching to the choir now. Things change so rapidly. It is like a bull ride, in a way. I've already called it a highway. Now it's a bull ride, right? It's about hanging on. How many of you have actually ridden a bull? My hand's just up just for, you know, I've ridden the mechanical bull, right? Mechanical bull, right? How many people rode on a mechanical bull? Okay? So on the mechanical bull, what they tell you is, don't try to hold on too tight because you'll get thrown off faster, right? What you need to do is loosen up and actually try to anticipate where things are going, where you think the bull is going to move. And that's where you need to try that's your best chance of staying on as long as you can. And that's really what we're saying about big process. It's really about holding on. That's really the best you can do. So how do we hold on when it comes to big process? What are the things we need to do? So when we looked at this, started doing this big process research, we actually came up with several drivers for big process. I talked about some of them, but we also came up with some very specific steps that customers need to take to begin to wrestle with it. Not tame it, because it's not really possible, but to wrestle with it and get a little bit of better handle on it. And so out of those different hows, I actually came up with what we call the 4 C's of big process. It's really the 4 dimensions of dealing with big process. So customer is the first one. You hear us talk about customer all the time. You've heard customer a good bit. We're going to talk about, well, how do you actually bring the customer into the picture? And how do you use that to actually begin changing process? Then we'll talk about chaos, the next dimension, right? How do you accept that chaos is a reality and actually take advantage of it? Context, I think this is probably one of the most overused words, but we really have to begin to understand how to bring context into view to actually drive faster change. And then, of course, cloud. So let's look at the first one, customer. So we know, I mean, I mentioned before, one of my joys in life, I hate to say it like that, but it really is, one of my joys in life is working with customers. And some of the customers we're working with, it's really interesting. Actually, some of these customers are in federal government, and the biggest conversations they're having is around transforming the customer experience. How do I transform the customer experience? And a lot of it is about bringing together the web, mobile, all of these different experiences to deliver a changed way of engaging, right? And it's really fascinating when we start looking at this. You know, I get this question. We started talking about the customer experience, transforming the customer experience a couple years back with the book that we published on Empowered and the empowered workforce, empowered consumers. And I always get customers saying, you know, over the last year saying, what's so new about customers? I mean, it's always, haven't we always focused on customers and customer service? Yeah, but not in the way you have to focus now. Because customers, obviously, very engaged, have the power of switching, right? We know this. But it's still amazing to see that so few companies really focus on improving the customer experience, right? So if we look at it, only 7% of the companies surveyed in our customer experience index, this is 2010, we do this every so often here, but in 2010, only 7% had excellent, 29% good, 35% okay. And when we do these surveys, they're looked at as the J.D. Power of customer experience, right? So we have several metrics. We interview customers of different companies to understand what the customer experience looks like. And so we're seeing some of these scores go up, but not dramatically. So why does this matter? This actually translates into money. We're actually able to show for companies that are able to improve their customer experience score by 10 percentage points, they're actually able to drive massive revenue growth. In the case of wireless carriers, we looked at the difference, the delta between the ones that had a 10-point gap, let's say, and the difference was 1.7, that's actually in billions, in millions, $1.7 billion for a wireless carrier, Hotel 1.7 billion. That's pretty massive, and this is concrete. These are things that you would need to do.